Today we have a 2013 Nissan 370Z Nismo. Now the 370Z is the successor to the coveted 350Z. For those of you guys familiar with my channel, I have done a lot with the Nissan 350Z. So what do we have here? We have a 370Z. The 370Z is a continuous improvement of the 350Z. The 370Z is what happens when you know you have a good thing to begin with and you incrementally improve every aspect of it without risking changing anything on the car. Now some of you guys will say the 350Z wasn't that good, it was NA. To which I say, you've never been to a track day and overheated a turbo or supercharged motor. Anyway, we all know naturally aspirated cars are a better driver's car. That's hard to argue with, but that's not the discussion of this video today. If you want to argue with me, go ahead and go to the comments, I'll make sure to ignore them. With that said, taking the basis of a driver's car, normally aspirated manual transmission car, we have the Z in front of us today. Now, this is a 2013 model. This is a pretty modern car for still being normally aspirated. So many cars are going turbo and auto and DCT and all that stuff. So, we're going to review what this car does good. Is it that much better than the 350Z? And what flaws does it have? It can't be perfect, right? There are flaws in this car, in this platform, that you do need to know about before going into it. I can't just say it's 100% better than the 350Z in every way, shape, and form. There are some caveats here. So, let's give a rundown of the car real quick. It is a front-engine, rear-wheel drive car with a 3.7-liter V6. The Nismo model here makes 350 horsepower at the crank. Then, as you can see here, it's got the Boy Racer body kit, which I think looks amazing. You know, just really gives that Boy Racer look. It's aerodynamic. It's actually designed by a team of engineers with access to a wind tunnel and all kinds of resources to say, this is the best design to make it aerodynamic. So, with that said, you get a lot of other goodies with the car, tuned suspension, all kinds of stuff. With that said, let's get in the car and go for a drive. So, disclaimer, real quick, it does have a gritty exhaust system on it. The stock Nismo exhaust is so quiet. To put it in perspective, a stock 350Z exhaust has more tone than the stock Nismo exhaust on this car. A little disappointing in my opinion, because these motors, they sound, well, you know my affinity for the trumpet gang. Trumpet go burr. So let's start with what this car does better than the 350Z, right? We know the basic outline of the car: front engine, rear wheel drive, 6-speed manual, and V6 is NA. So this has a VQ37 VHR, which is an improvement over the HR motor, which everyone loves, knows for making good NA power, and you can boost them and make a lot of power as well. This car still does that. I think the record for NA bolt-ons is actually like 360 to 370 wheel in this car, 93 octane. Pretty impressive. So what you get with this VQ is you still get that buttery power band, very low torque, or very flat torque curve, comes on very low into the RPM range, and then this revs up to 7,500 RPM, which is pretty awesome for such a big motor, right? With a tune, I think you can take these to 8,000 safely, which is pretty sweet to have an 8,000 RPM screamer like that. So what they've done here with the motor is excellent. One thing you're kind of locked out of is camshaft options if you want to go that far. Nissan has a new technology called VVEL, which basically adjusts the valve lift and duration, which is pretty cool technology. But when you try to modify it, there's really no solutions right now other than getting some VQ35 HR heads and putting them on this block, and then you can do cams and go crazy. So, but at that point, if you're doing cams and digging in that deep, you're kind of ready for that price deficit anyway. So otherwise, I think most of you guys will be pretty satisfied with basic bolt-ons and a tune on this car. So the transmission that it hooks up to is a further iteration of what the 350Z had. Everyone knows about the CD009, and then the HRs actually have what's called a JK41, and that's an improvement over this. So you get this bulletproof transmission, right? Good for 800 foot-pounds of torque or whatever it's rated for. It can just take gobs of power at it. Your transmission is your last worry in this car, I'll tell you that right now. Now, one problem area of the transmission is the concentric slave cylinder. So basically that's an internal slave cylinder inside of the bell housing. They tend to fail pretty quick on, and they leak. When they leak, they soak your clutch in brake fluid or clutch fluid, whatever you want to call it, right? Same thing. And you have to drop the transmission to do the service. So that's a little annoying, and that's something you want to keep an eye out for when you're buying these cars. Has the slave cylinder been done? If not, that might be a good negotiation point to bring the price down of the car. If you found someone who's done it, or even better, has gone to an external slave cylinder conversion, which there's aftermarket solutions for, that's a very good selling point for this car if you're looking for one of these. So then power goes to a viscous limited slip differential. For those that have watched my videos, they know about my love for the viscous. I hate the viscous, but you know what, it's better than nothing, right? It works. It'll get you on the track and not spinning your inside tire too much. So, but that is a downfall of the drivetrain of the car, is the viscous limited slip is very neutering to the car. A good limited slip differential really brings out the potential of these vehicles. So, chassis dynamics. Now, comparing to the 350Z, what they've done here is they've shortened the wheelbase, made the track wider, which, if you think about it, a shorter wheelbase should be easier to rotate, right? What's easier to get around a parking lot? A bus or a car, right? See where I'm going with this? Then, when you widen the track, you're giving it a bigger stance, right? So now you have your tires out further, which, you know, gives more stability, more grip, right? So, and it's not aggressively different, it's just minor changes in those two magnitudes, which make the chassis dynamics a lot better, a little less understeer, a little more rotation, a lot more grip. On top of that, they've improved upon the existing suspension geometry the 350Z already had. So it's very similar. If you look at the two suspensions together, they are very similar, but they've just made minor changes. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. With the chassis as well, they have managed to actually reduce weight of the car, which is kind of crazy. That's, you know, you get used to this trend of seeing newer cars heavier every generation, but they've managed to shave a little bit of weight and increase the rigidity of the vehicle, which I think is just absolutely impressive, you know, especially going into a newer, more modern chassis, which is another check off the box that they have really improved upon the baseline of the 350Z. Now, I will say though, with all these improvements, it's still a front heavy car. It's still prone to understeer when pushing it to the limit. And you know that you can make all the changes you want. The biggest change you can make in the front is going to wider tires in the front, and that helps significantly, but it'll never be a Miata. I'll tell you that. It'll never have that go-kart-like feeling when you compare it to a Miata. Some of you guys may say, it feels like a go-kart to me, but yeah, you know, I'm not saying the car is very direct, it's very responsive, and it turns in very good. But when you start to drive more cars, it still is not going to be that. It's going to lean on the air of pushing the front tires rather than turning in aggressively, right? So that's just one thing to consider with these cars, but you are getting into a bit of a bigger platform. But, you know, it's one of those trade-offs. Do you get a lighter weight car that has a little bit of better turn-in, a little bit of better front axle maneuver, or do you get a little more power? And, you know, it's not an aggressive split of the two. It just depends on what you really want out of the car the most. So, and where I'm leaning with this is kind of going to its competitor in the market right now, the FRS or the BRZ or the GT86, whatever you want to call it, the twins. Here's the big thing though. You're spending that much money on a car, used or new, they're pretty similar in price. Look at what you get. You swipe right on a honey on Tinder, you match. You say, hey, let's go for a drive in my sports car. You pull up in the FRS, she's gonna, I don't know, man. You pull up in the Z, there's definitely gonna be a second date. No back seats. Did you want back seats? Why are you looking at this car if you want back seats? You're looking at the wrong car. Click off of the video now.
Please don't watch the end and then click off the video.
The brakes in this car, I almost forgot about them. They're good. They are big honking 4-piston brakes. They use a large, massive rotor, big brakes. I mean, that is one thing. If you get this car, if you get a 370Z with the Akabano brake package, you'll never have to touch your brakes. All you have to do is pads, and that's it. There'll never be a reason. There's very little chance you'll need more brakes than this, unless you're going on to like endurance racing and you need carbon ceramics or some big six, or you just need something way out of the bounds of what this car is from the box anyway, where you're already gutting the car completely, right? The interior is leaps and bounds better than the 350Z. Oh my goodness. It no longer looks like a Fisher-Price kit stuffed into a car. There's actually nicer materials in here, a lot of plush stuff. It just looks nice in here. It's way better of a place to be in. Except when you look at the gauges. The tach is good, the speedometer is good, but then you got this digital gauge cluster that just really dates the car. It really screams 2009. That is the one thing that is aging poorly in this car. But otherwise, everything else is great. You have your gauges directly in front of you. As a driver, you can just look straight ahead, get your gauges, look to the right, just glance, and you get your oil temperatures, and all that stuff is ready and available for you. I do have one gripe about this interior. These seats. These seats, they're not bad. They wouldn't be bad in like a base model or the normal 370Z model. But the Nismo model, they stitched the words Nismo into it. It looks so tacky. What? Nissan, what are you doing? What eBay vendor are you working with to get these goddamn seats? These are terrible. The year after this, where they went to the different body style without the wing, without the big wing, that is, they have Recaros, and they're freaking sweet. They're so awesome. Why couldn't this car get them? I am so angry because I think this Nismo looks a lot better, but didn't get the good seats. And you know how much those seats cost? Those seats cost so much. I am very passionate about this topic right now. So, we've gone through everything this car has done good and better than the predecessors in its competition. But there are some caveats with this car. And it depends on what you want to do with this car, really. Depending on what you want, these may not bug you. But me, personally, being a guy who likes to track his car, I look at these things and I say, okay, is this going to be an issue? So the big one that bothers me the most is the ABS and stability control systems in this car. They are very nannying in this vehicle. Now, there's been reports, there's videos you can look up. I'll give you one example from who I bought my 128i from, actually. He built the 370Z for STX, SECA. In that class, you can run a 9-inch wide wheel and 255/35 tires, or that's the tire size you would run on that car for that class, right, for max optimization. You can't run any wider, which is narrower than the stock wheels and tires. With that change in diameter and width, the stability control system went on the fritz. He actually flat spotted 4 tires in one event, and the car went up for sale right after. It's an issue these cars have. When you go to bigger, wider tires, depending on the size you get, I think if it's greater or less than 3% the actual diameter of the wheel, the original tire size, the factory tire size, you're going to have ABS issues when you start to push the car hard. It's not going to be able to read your wheel speeds. It's going to think you're locking up, or it's going to think you're not locking up and you can put more brake, and you're just going to have really weird ABS moments. So then your next solution is, naturally, well, when you go to the track, drive without ABS. Makes you a better driver, right? Only that this car, when you unplug the ABS, defaults to a 50-50 brake bias. So now, every car has 70-30 on the road, right? And then some cars are different, but when you go to a 50-50 brake bias in a car like this, you're asking for oversteer on your braking zones. Tremendous oversteer on your braking zones. It just makes things a mess. So, there are solutions. A lot of the guys that do track these, if you find the communities and you ask the questions and you read the posts on the forums, you'll find, run this tire size with this wheel size, I have success with this, and guys are playing around with different pad combinations. So running this brand up front and this pad in the rear really, works with this wheel setup. And there's a workaround for it. It is possible, but you need to know. You can't just run into this car, slap on some good pads and go to the track and think you're going to be fine. There's a high chance you're going to have ABS issues. So, to add on to this, I personally was looking at a 370Z for myself. And a few years ago, I was at a Pirelli World Challenge event at Utah Motorsports campus, and they run 370Zs in one of the classes there. I went up to one of the teams and started talking to them a little bit, and then I asked them the question, what do you guys do to remedy the ABS issues these cars have? The whole room got quiet. One of the guys looks at me and he says, we can't tell you. He then told me the Nismo modules are much better though, and that's all I have. So it must be a software programming thing. I remember reading an article a while ago that basically the reason the base and sport 370Z models have that issue is just for a safety factor. I think on the Nismos they're able to pull back some of that ABS nanniness and, get a better system out of it. So I think with a good combination, if you can afford a Nismo, get a Nismo, and you'll be really well set for the track. The next one is cooling. These cars run hot. They run hot. They cook oil like no other. IQ has a lot of documentation of the temperature issues these cars have. On a 90-degree day at Willow Springs, the car will go into limp mode after 3 laps. That's how hot they get. Oil temps get to 260 degrees really fast, and 260, 265s where Nissan's bearings don't like to be. That's where you start to cook the bearings. They also have a lot of coolant issues. They run hot. They just don't have good airflow is the issue. That Pirelli World Challenge team I was talking to said, you know, with all the modifications and ducting they made, they were still overheating when they were drafting cars. If they were ever in the slipstream and there's no airflow through the radiator, they started to get hot pretty quick, so they couldn't rely on drafting too much. It's just one of those things, if you want to track the car, you need to make that invested in cooling systems as well. You need to get a good radiator and a good oil cooling system. The Nismos, their front bumpers, they create a higher pressure zone, so they force more air through the radiator. So that's one thing to consider. If you really want to track this car, I keep saying, pushing on the Nismo, get a Nismo. One of the more minor issues these cars have when you start to track them is if you ever have below 3/4 of a tank of gas, the car, around corners, I can't remember if it's left or right, but it's only one direction, the fuel sloshes and the fuel pump can't pick up fuel, so you hit fuel cut. So, which can sometimes be a dangerous thing if you hit fuel cut mid-corner, high RPM, and then all of a sudden you go lean for a second. You know, this is one thing to consider. They make kits out there as well. They're a little fuel pump you put on one side of the tank and it pumps fuel over to the other side. There is remedies for all these issues, guys, but I just want to say this isn't a turnkey race car. You can't go to the track. You can, but you know, you're risking a lot. So just one thing to consider buying this car. Is that a reason to not buy this car? I would say no. I mean, it's the reason why I didn't want to, but I was in college and didn't want to spend the money and all this stuff. I could avoid it, right? So that's kind of where I'm thinking. Now, I will say I think the 350Z is also a better drift car for 2 reasons. One, longer wheelbase. Not much longer, but a longer wheelbase can help you sustain angle just a little bit better. But that's a minor one. 370Zs drift great still. They're a great drift platform if that's what you're looking for. But it's just one little thing to consider. But the 350Z is a lot more disposable. There's a lot more in production. There's a lot more around the world to get parts off of. They're cheaper, so you don't feel as bad wrecking the car, because you're going to put that car through some abuse, right? But, like I said, you want this car, you want the power, you want the 370Z looks, you want whatever this car offers for you. It's not a reason to shy away from it. Just things to consider depending on what your actual overall arching goal is. And there you have it, guys. That is my review of the Nissan 370Z. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. You know, the car isn't 100% better in every way, but there's a lot of things it does better than its predecessor, right? So with that said, that should help you make a decision of what you're going to do with the car. If you really want this car, what you should look into, and you know what you can expect in the future with this car. So I hope this video was really helpful. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video, and I hope to see you guys in the next car review. Thanks for watching, guys.